So, number one, thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it. Obviously, this is great
Absolutely.
to put it all into perspective. Kind of draw attention to this lesser known moment in American history that I think was still pretty pivotal. So,
Oh, it was so important. And I think tying that connection between the two is so crucial because he gave his what I call dress rehearsal for the I Have a Dream speech in Detroit. And then because he was kind of floundering in Washington, they ended up, Mahalia called out and said, Martin, tell him about the dream from Detroit. And so he launched back into what he had given in Detroit. And that's what we know today.
you you were there on this historic day. Tell me all about that and what that was like.
Oh my goodness. It's very hard to put into words because I was a very small child at the time. My grandmother had come from the South up north to Detroit from Louisiana. And so she had been aware of the inequities in the South. But when she came to the North, she was kind of surprised by all that she found here, too, that still had yet to be done. So she was, around different activists in this area, this region near Detroit. And because of that, she heard about this march that was going to be going on. There was a lot of buzz about it because it was the first time that a lot of different groups were gathering together, folks not only from the different churches, but also from community activists like Grace and Jimmy Boggs, who were very active in this part of the country. And so when that happened, she was like, oh, I've got to go. Well, she had somebody she had to take care of, and that was me. And I was just about to turn 3 years old. And so she packed a lunch and we went down to Woodward Avenue, which is a huge, our main street in Detroit. And she said she was just overwhelmed by how many people had shown up. Up until the March on Washington, this was the largest march that had happened in the country. It was over 125,000 people. So she became worried about, my safety, but she had kept me close. And all I can fully describe is that there was such a feeling of warmth and solidarity and people singing and marching. And to me, it was like we were having a great party because everybody was, so engaged and, chanting. And she was walking beside them, and we were just kind of caught up in all of that really powerful, beautiful energy. People of every color, people of every age, all together there, down crowded in this space. And so that day, I think for me, really, I think it inspired me in so many ways because I thought about how this moment where we saw the possibility of what could be really ignited in me a flame that I think continues to this day. I work in the Department of Afro-American and African Studies at the University of Michigan. I'm very proud of that. I love the fact that, we're still on the journey to try to, unite people in a country that sometimes we have trouble seeing how much we are more alike than unalike. And so, that beautiful quote by Maya Angelou sticks with me as well. That moment of being with just so many people and feeling caught up in that magic, and to know, as I got older, that I had actually seen Dr. King. It was like I was there with this man who was very familiar to the area. He'd been coming to Detroit ever since he was young because, as our Detroit historian, Yaman Jordan says, his father's oldest sister lived in Detroit. So he was coming to Detroit on a regular basis. And from the time he was 15, he had been attending conferences and things here. So, again, that feeling that connection with another youth who, of course, went on to do so many great things, it just really kept me inspired all through my life. And I just really made a conscious effort to continue that legacy, which is why I'm so happy that people today, we now have a national holiday to stop, reflect, and think about what it means to actually imagine a world where everyone is united. It's just, it kind of overwhelms you, but I still have faith that it can happen.
And I think we all sincerely hope it does. I mean, right? I mean, it's a very powerful thought. You know, and certainly, I think just as poignant now as it was then, if not, you know, maybe more so. You know, when you
Absolutely.
really reflect on it. But I mean, it sounds, you know, electric to say the least. You know, to have
Oh,
been out there and experienced all of that.
the
You know, and
energy.
certainly, right, and you know,
Mhm.
certainly, I think, you know, even you know, the images we see, the still images of this march, the Walk to Freedom, are striking for the time, because you see, you know, a former governor, you see
Yes,
representatives of the sitting governor, you see police officers and the police chief all kind of marching, you know,
yeah,
together regardless of race, right?
that's it. That's it. And when you think about, the idea that this was really what civil rights activists consider to be the dress rehearsal that kind of primed Dr. King. He had not had a crowd like that before. Of course, in the South, they had faced so much backlash and pushback and everything from violent protests to his marches, that this was a march all about love and solidarity is just so wonderful. And, the idea that he had this moment to be able to begin his, before he was on, the Southern platform and people knew him well there. But this was a march in Michigan, in Detroit, in a very large city that was not his typical venue. He of course spoke all over the country, but previous to this march, he had spoken at the University of Michigan. I mean, he had been around here, but to have this number, which, it being the largest in the country, up until 2 months later when he does the march on Washington, it just, here we have this best kept secret that, our state was so actively involved in civil rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, yeah, I'm not sure that a lot of people are aware, you know, of the extent to which, you know, Michigan, you know, played a role in all of this, these, you know, titanic struggles of the day, um, you know, that obviously became, you know, so famous and so kind of ingrained in the national consciousness, right? Um,
Right.
you know, and when King spoke, obviously he was, you know, arguably addressing a very different version of America, segregation, Jim Crow, you know, everything kind of, you know, occurring through this racial lens. Tell me about what life was like in those days, you know, for yourself, for
Mm.
your family. What, you know, what stands out to you?
Well, I'm very fortunate that my family, having migrated from the South, as so many people did, during that era, I thought about it, my grandmother came here actually 100 years ago to this area because, that it was literally dangerous, to be in the South in certain places at the wrong time, or even, just living your daily life. And so, what I think a lot of people don't know also is that this was also in Michigan. We had slavery in Michigan. And so, this brilliant scholar Taya Miles has written a book called Dawn of Detroit that talks about the plantations in Detroit. So it's not like this was removed from our existence either. So I think that was something that really surprised my grandmother and other of my relatives who came from the South, because they came thinking, oh, this is going to be the land of milk and honey, but there were still struggles because, of course, people were coming from the South of all colors too. So they were still carrying their feelings about supremacy that, we still had to work on. So, that idea that it really is a constant struggle. And even to this day, there's been so much where we sometimes feel ourselves divided from one another. And it really saddens me because I know that we have the potential to do so much more and that we can work together. And many people have so successfully. And so I just really feel as though it's something that we can continue to work on, but understand that, all of us have to do this every day. It's not something you just, today's equality day and let's celebrate MLK and then tomorrow I'm going to go back to my old ways. I think we have to constantly be aware of, am I reaching out to someone else? Can I make someone else's life better? Am I looking at someone through a lens, whether it's looking at someone because they're disabled or because they are older or because they're young? All of these things are still a part of us seeing one another as equal. And that's something that's a challenge.
Sure, sure. And obviously it's still something we tackle every day, in this country. But even though it's still very much this work in progress and kind of an ever-changing landscape there, how would you, I guess, how would you define kind of the direct impact of an event like the Walk to Freedom, later, of course, the March on Washington, and the most famous version of that speech, which of course we all know.
Right. I think, it was something, and it took someone like Dr. King, who was very reflective. He was a very introspective man. And yet at the same time, he was extroverted in that he was a pastor. And it took someone who had excellent communicative skills to be able to impart that type of knowledge. Because, you know, a lot of people can say things, but when you have someone who's able, and we see that now with social media, folks who are able, who go viral are the ones who are very charismatic, who have some special, you know, characteristic that just is a spark that lights other people up. It's There's a beautiful word, namaste, which means the God in me sees the God in you. And so it's that person who can help you understand that you can be better. And I think Dr. King was uniquely gifted with that skill. His voice, when you listen to it, and I encourage everyone to just put him on. And the other wonderful thing about this speech was it was actually Berry Gordy at Motown Records asked permission to record it. So it's on Motown Records. And it's crazy to think Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr. is on Motown Records, but
Was kind of a Motown artist, right? Yeah.
I know he's a Motown artist. So when you visit the Motown Museum, the album's hanging on the wall. And I remember as a little girl thinking, oh my gosh, I was there. And, what in the world? This is incredible. But, that deep, rolling, beautiful voice, it just sounded like a waterfall, and I, I just can't say enough about how, you know, sometimes when you have a specific gift like that, it really helps others to understand. And so, there's many ways that you find people who are teachers, and that's a moment where I think we all were taught a beautiful lesson.
What a beautiful way to describe that. Yeah, absolutely. Very much I think a teaching moment, right, and a learning moment for the country at large.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so nearly 60 years on,
Right.
would you say, which is crazy, but I mean, would you say that it's that the message is more or less poignant today than it was in 1963?
Mm. I have to say, I think it is more poignant today because back then, people, it was 60 years ago. And so folks had experienced Jim Crow. They had lived through, it was closer to that era of enslavement that had, created this schism in our society. Whereas when you think about now, so often you see how it's very challenging for folks to look across the table at one another and talk. Just talk and not view everything as political, and just look at the humanity within one another. You know, when you travel to other countries and you see people, I've spent time in South Africa, and they took so much of their inspiration from our civil rights movement in ending apartheid there. But then when I was there, it was kind of bittersweet, because I thought, wow, there's still some places that I go to, and I have challenges with people not seeing me as someone who they feel that is not even their equal, but as a human. So how is that, happening? And we're 60 years from that, experience. So it makes me a little sad. I had hoped, that the children of today wouldn't have to experience the things that I did when I was young. But on the other hand, I see so much progress from that time that it gives me hope. So, it's not like, I feel totally downtrodden. I feel like we're on the path, and sometimes you take a step forward and two back, but you're still moving a little bit ahead each day.
Well, sure, sure. And that, ultimately kind of the reality that he saw is, one that we all realize. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else that you would add? I mean, I think, I've covered a lot of my bases, and
Mm. I just think, honestly, what's so beautiful about this day is it is a day for dreamers. And I know that people will sometimes laugh at folks who daydream and who have these visions. But if you don't have a vision or a dream, it's very hard to make anything come to fruition. So I think what's powerful here is that, you know, sure, he had these wonderful ideas and thoughts, but he put action to them. And because of that, we have a Voting Rights Act, because of the push by the people. And it was the people from all across this country who said, you know what? America deserves to be what was written in the Constitution. This is a this is a good constitution. It's a beautiful one, but we've got to make it fair for everyone. And so I do believe that, the action behind the words is what makes it meaningful. And so I'm really, really happy. This is my favorite national holiday. I just feel like, you know, it's just a great day to stop and think about, what can I do to be a better person?